Mr. Speaker, may I greet you by saying Ni Hao Ma. I think it is important on this occasion to greet you. I'm laughing because my colleagues are making fun of my Chinese when I'm trying to get into the mood of the occasion. I've never been to China, Mr. Speaker, but I know many wonderful people out in Manukau of Chinese heritage who give and contribute significantly to the local community in Manukau and no doubt throughout this country. In fact, I've met a couple of mayors of Chinese heritage, one in the area of Gisborne who speaks Māori fluently, and the other mayor of in the South Island, is it Dunedin or Christchurch? Dunedin. And they're wonderful people and wonderful friends. Peter Chin, who showed me also the Chinese garden there in Dunedin. But also, sir, in just reflecting as we debate the tariff New Zealand, Hong Kong, China Closer Economic Partnership Agreement Amendment Bill, which is a mouthful, I know in my own heritage, I have relatives who are of Chinese heritage. In fact, more recently, the addition to our family of some years ago was my sister-in-law. Although originally from China, comes from Malaysia, and we're going to be talking about the Malaysia Amendment Bill later on. In the past 6 or 7 months, though, Mr. Speaker, my office has been assisting a young man from Manukau who has a girlfriend living in Hong Kong and has been attempting to try and bring her over here. And for some reason or rather, it's taken close now to 7 months before agreement by our immigration authorities for her to receive a visa to be able to visit this young man in Manukau. But anyway, I thought I'd say those things in preface as we debate this particular bill. I know as a young man, I've always wanted to go to China, wanted to be around Hong Kong. In fact, when Bruce Lee came out, we all thought he was a relative. But nevertheless, I know that some members of this House are planning on going to China later on this year or next month, particularly the Shanghai Expo, which I understand is probably an expo that will be receiving many heads of states from throughout the world. But this is a government bill which has been introduced by the Honourable Tim Grosser, the Minister of Trade, and it is about the Closer Economic Partnerships Agreement, which is a vital part of New Zealand's economic development policy. And we in Labour are supporting this closer economic partnership because we believe it will provide increased opportunities and certainty for New Zealand exports to an important market, a market, sir, that is going to be very critical for the rest of the world simply because of the sheer size of its population, and with that population will come significant demands for goods, food in particular. But it is also a market, sir, that I want to say is of concerning in other aspects, and I'll get into that at a later stage. The closer economic partnerships lead to increased exports and imports and the potential for added wealth to both countries. And I understand that New Zealand signed this closer economic partnership with Hong Kong on the 29th of March. And so this bill now implements that particular agreement. And the bill amends the Tariff Act as part of the implementation of the New Zealand-Hong Kong-China Closer Economic Partnership. And the amendments will enable the application of preferential tariff rates under the Closer Economic Partnership. Not only is Hong Kong an important market in its own right, our 9th largest export destination in 2009, but it provides a vital foothold for New Zealand businesses in expanding into the much larger Chinese market. And I think with the number of Chinese citizens or New Zealand citizens of Chinese heritage living in this country, I think it bodes well that we're not only developing relationships on the human level, but in the business level and in the cultural level. And I think, sir, as I've always maintained, that really makes New Zealand a much richer country by accepting that it's not just business, it's also about building on and developing people relationship. And no doubt, sir, like these things, as I understand, take time. And so the Closer Economic Partnership Agreement had its roots in the work of former Trade Minister Jim Sutton and was reinvigorated by the Honourable Phil Goff during his tenure as Trade Minister. And I think it's important, sir, that we recognise the efforts of those who have worked on this in the past to get us to this point. And I suspect that the work that Mr Tim Grosser is doing as the Trade Minister, that we will see the fruits of that, or maybe no fruits, whatever the case may be in the future. But the point I'm making, sir, often these trade agreements or our working through this to arrive at signing up these agreements does take some time. It does take people relationship, because if we are unable to build trust, well then how can we trade? And so from Labour's perspective, we welcome this bill and the Closer Economic Partnership as it further develops our already close relationship with the people of Hong Kong and the government of Hong Kong. And I think it is important from our perspective that we build closer economic relationships with Asia, as that's a vital market to New Zealand's future economic prosperity, as these are major markets in the future, as I've said. And this closer economic partnership is another step in that direction. Now, sir, I've listened to the Green members and they've raised some concerns, which I think are fair enough. Because while free trade agreements and closer economic partnerships come with undoubted benefits, we cannot ignore the fact, sir, that for some businesses and sectors, economic agreements, free trade agreements and closer economic partnerships can cause harm. And this closer economic partnership has been evaluated as having a low negative impact on New Zealand businesses, largely because Hong Kong specialises in services rather than cheap manufactured goods, which could undercut some of our local businesses. New Zealand manufacturers of footwear, textiles, etc., are most at risk from free trade agreements. And this closer economic partnership has given those sectors the longest face-out periods of tariffs to allow them time to adjust. Now, labour rights and environmentalist sustainability are core New Zealand values, which shouldn't be sacrificed for the sake of increased trade. So when undertaking negotiations, they need to be held high on the agenda. I understand, sir, that we're supporting this closer economic partnership because it enhances labour rights and environmental sustainability. And the closer economic partnership contains an environment agreement with shared objectives between New Zealand and Hong Kong aimed at improving the environment and enhancing the capacity and capability of each country's governments, agencies, research organisations, academic institutions and businesses to address trade and environmental matters. And finally, so the national interest analysis states that the closer economic partnership is not expected to have any negative effects on the environment in New Zealand that cannot be managed using existing policy frameworks. Its provisions may encourage improved productivity and the use of natural resources. And the concern that I raised initially, sir, really is about that. It has to do with our customs portfolio. Our country has been working quite strongly to ensure that we're detecting illegal drugs crossing our borders, and I think there'll be others who have some concern about that. But really, I think, sir, that when we enter into these relationships, I think it is to the benefit of our country that we develop these relationships slowly, that we ensure that the laws are in place to implement it, to enhance it. But I think we also need to be letting the rest of the world know, particularly our partners, that we have certain values, core values here.
Sorry to interrupt the honourable